Coach Erik, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to jump on here and talk shop a little bit. For the listeners at home, will you tell us a little bit about your background, your motivation, and kind of where you are currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm the Director of Sports Performance at eForce Performance. That's a private sector facility here in Portland, Oregon. A little bit about my background. I'm originally from the Portland area. Played high school football primarily out here. And then from there had the opportunity to go play a little bit of college ball at NAI school down the road in Southern Oregon. Kind of figured out while I was there that I enjoyed the process of training to prep for football more than I did playing football.
Yeah.
To be honest, being a little bit undersized, college football is a little bit of a stretch for me to begin with. With that being said, I had a phenomenal GA who actually had played football at Oregon State and was doing kind of GA strength and conditioning football coach for us at Southern Oregon, who saw my aspirations as a strength coach and being interested in strength and conditioning, and really encouraged me to take the path of jumping into Oregon State and doing an internship there and doing my undergrad there. Basically saying in a nutshell, if that's what you really want to do is be a strength coach, a small NAI school is probably not going to get it done for you, especially in regards to connections. So I transferred from Southern Oregon, went to Oregon State, applied and got in, obviously did the undergrad there, and then just kind of stuck my nose in the Sports Performance Center there, and then met Brian Miller, who at the time was the Director of Sports Performance, and then he gave me my internship opportunity. So believe it or not, I was 19 years old when I first started my ever collegiate strength and conditioning internship.
Okay.
So from there, I was an undergraduate intern and assistant, graduated, did a follow-up internship with Mark McLaughlin in the private sector here in Portland, which was immensely educating in terms of just looking at training in a whole new light. With some of the things he does with Omega Wave and just being physiologically based more than biomechanically based, and really just kind of flipped strength and conditioning on the head for me, and really opened my eyes to this wide breadth of information. And then from there was fortunate enough through mutual connections to meet Ryan DePaulo, who was the founder of eForce Performance.
Okay.
He had a great business mind and a great model, and I basically told him, look, man, with where I'm at right now, this seems like a phenomenal opportunity, and if you want to take care of the business side of things, I'll come in and write the programming, train the kids, build an internship, and in a larger scale, hopefully down the road, build a sports performance company out of it. And 4 or 5 years down the road, we got 2 facilities. I got a staff of 3 guys, and then we also run an internship training athletes from youth to professionals, kind of utilizing the principles of long-term athlete development.
I love it. Okay. That's really great to hear. So let's kind of dive into that training a little bit, right? What's your kind of training model look like at eForce?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're super fortunate compared to a lot of private sector facilities in that we have really good interdisciplinary staff. So at both facilities that we have, we're fortunate enough to have nutritionists on staff and also physical therapists on staff that are different companies. But what that allows us to do is kind of have this one-stop shop, almost think of like an Exos in a sense. So athletes can come in, they can start working with us, we can put them through an evaluation. If they don't grade out well or have pre-existing injuries, we can push them straight into physical therapy where they can schedule a physical therapy consult and session. And as strength coaches, we can actually sit in that session with the kids, have these open dialogues, kind of build this relationship, which inevitably builds phenomenal trust in the athlete, knowing that we're here to service them and give them their best opportunity to be successful. And so it's a really unique, dynamic. With that being said, primarily in person, we work on speed, power, and strength, but then we also give kids what we consider like homework or things to do on their own in regards to developing, the aerobic system or extra mobility and correctives or things that, I always make the joke that, I'd never have you pay me money to hold a stopwatch and say set go. So things that they can kind of do on their own that are very straightforward structurally wise.
Yeah. Okay. What have you been able to apply kind of from the stuff that you've learned in your time interning and even with Mark McLaughlin into the current company that you're at now? Yeah.
From both Mark and from my time at Oregon State, the biggest thing that I recognize is, you got to start somewhere. And if you're writing programs for athletes with the goal of getting better, there's a few things. You need to have an evaluation process because you need to know where they're at day 0. Because without that, it's really hard to be able to get a gauge of, what types of training that they need, principles and methods you want to implement, basically tough to make any meaningful steps moving forward. So first and foremost, we root everything we do with athletes on a very thorough evaluation process. And then secondly, off of both of those, we look at things from, movement quality and movement potential through some of our movement screens, out to, output based with jumping and sprinting and lifting, to even, capacity based. So if we're looking at things like resting heart rate, to just see like low level, aerobic fitness and even some autonomic balance, to things like anaerobic capacity tests or alactic threshold tests, really just trying to get the biggest, broadest scope of who this athlete is and what their goals are to be able to program for them efficiently. So really with my time at Oregon State and with Mark McLaughlin, my biggest takeaways from there is, first and foremost, having an evaluation, and then second of all, having a system in which you can kind of take these results and plug and play, so to speak, to put together a program, understanding that there's going to be some, agile periodization that needs to happen on the day-to-day that's going to kind of guide these kids in the right direction.
Okay. So what makes your gym kind of different from any of the other private gyms across America?
Sure. I think, I really appreciate looking at some of these other private gyms and what they do really successfully. One of the things that, again, I commend is having an interdisciplinary staff where there's these open lines of communication, so the athlete knows that, they can really truly trust the process like we expect them to. So knowing that, we have their best interests at hand, that, it's not just a money grab for us, but we're looking to put them where they need to be. So if strength and conditioning and sports performance isn't the right outlet for them at this moment, I'm going to send you to what I believe is the best opportunity, whether it's a physical therapist, whether it's a doctor, whatever it may be, to make sure that they know that, we're here to service them. And in turn, it actually builds a lot of trust and brings them back, wanting to do things more with us because they know, like I said before, that it's not just a money grab. And so I think really what the biggest difference is this huge immense amount of collaboration, which I think it's hard in the private sector, even with some of our professional athletes. You see that they've made comments before, like, I do PT over at this facility at 9 a.m., but then I have this weird 3-hour block where I don't get to do my strength and conditioning stuff until 12. So I'm trying to figure out what to do in that time. And then I don't have my skill work done until, 6. And so it takes me a whole day where I feel like I can condense it, get it all done, work with the team around me. And so I really think the biggest, change among other things is the fact that we have that team setting and, we can collaborate so well. And also that our coaches are just so progressive. We pride ourselves on being on a growth mindset and being comfortable with change and, being vulnerable to knowing that what we know right now might not be what's going to be best for athletes in, a year from now, but that we're going to do our best to educate ourselves and put ourselves in the best position to serve the athletes we work with.
No, I really like that. Okay. I mean, in a lot of ways, it sounds similar to the college model, right? Which is, I think, a very unique thing as well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I like that. Okay. How do you guys kind of utilize technology, and how might that kind of differ from how tech is used at like other private facilities or even in college?
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting when you start to have the technology conversation. I believe that there's a place for it, and I think it's super important. But what you got to understand is, if you really are working off of the models of long-term athlete development, especially with the younger kids, I'd say like sub-high school, one of the biggest tenets is making sure that they have a kind of this creative, organic passion and positive experience with just fitness and physical activity. And so I think getting too objective with kids too young, you put them in too structured of a program, you take away that organic athleticism that comes, especially this day and age where we have athletes who are playing outside and doing free play less, who are hyper competitive and having horrible competition to development ratios in terms of what is focused on. And then also just with the advent of technology, just being less physically active. I think a big tenet of ours is giving them, an environment, although controlled, to express, variability and express organic movement, and then just be able to have these positive interactions with fitness to hopefully drive in the long term, outlets, modalities, and methods that they can use to be active for life. So, with the younger crowd, we really don't touch technology a lot. With getting into our high school populations and obviously college and pro, the big ones we use is we use things like just jump mats. We use things like free lap timing systems. We use things like heart rate monitors. And for some of our elite guys, we'll use things like Omega Wave, really just to manage the process. So, are they hitting the right thresholds to make sure that we're dosing them appropriately for their speed development? And what is the cutoff for that? And are they doing too much or not enough? And then, same thing goes with jump. Are the ground contact times looking like what we want to train the qualities we said we're set out to train? From a heart rate standpoint, are we truly training them, in the appropriate aerobic zones or anaerobic zones, or are we making the appropriate physiological adaptations needed to service them for their sport? And then from a higher end standpoint, looking at the Omega Wave, whether it be DC potential or heart rate variability for some of our higher end guys, are we making these bigger, robust changes in the autonomic nervous system to shift them from sympathetic to parasympathetic, so we're not burning the candle at both ends, and they're always either in a recoverable state or an adaptable state to train.
Okay. No, I really like that. That's, a very intelligent approach, you know what I'm saying? And I think it's good that you kind of parse it out like that, because like you said, a lot of people are applying some advanced modalities to people that might not need it, right? So again, kids, they don't necessarily need some of that high level stuff, right? They just need to learn how to move and play and process. Like, that's good enough,
Absolutely. And a lot of these kids that I work with, they don't know the difference between their belly button and their butthole. So with that being said, oftentimes it's like, hey, I need you to do, 10 sets of air squats, and that's enough of a stimulus to start to ingrain some of these qualities. I don't need to strap a heart rate monitor or put them on the Omega Wave to know these things. And also, they're so young, their outputs are so low. In terms of like true raw physical outputs in regards to their genetic potential, they're not making these big dents in their CNS to where they need these long recovery windows like, say, a professional athlete or even a high-level high school or college athlete who's getting in closer and closer to the genetic ceiling, and training is becoming more and more intense.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Okay, so kind of pulling on that thread a little bit, right? What would you have to say about the whole of coaching staffs at private facilities, like kind of across the country?
Sure. Can you reiterate that for me?
Yeah. So, what is your kind of thought process in terms of like the whole of coaching staffs at private facilities, like across the country? Like, what do you think about kind of the programs they run, or just generally speaking, like the private sector?
Sure, that's a deep rabbit hole. But I would say there's a few things. I believe the private sector in general, especially from the outside observer, so individuals in the college sector or professional ranks, give it a bad rap. And to be honest, I'm not even mad at them for doing so. I think when you get into the private sector, there's such a low barrier to entry to be able to deem yourself a coach or a trainer. That there's a huge spectrum of variance from great to not so great. So you got guys and girls who have a GED and just want to do fitness stuff or like watching sports, and they get a weekend certification. Now all of a sudden they call themselves a coach, and they do really good at marketing, so they get a lot of people in, but they don't train well or have a good grasp on the training process. And on the other end, you might have PhDs who are touring, giving consultations, working outside consults for teams, who are phenomenal in their field and thought leaders in their field. So there's this huge wide breadth, and it's tough being an individual who prides himself on academics and kind of principle-based training, and we take a large portion of our time to be educated, that we're in a field where we're competing with these like quote unquote speed gurus who may have played a little bit of college ball and throw a cone on the ground and call themselves a trainer, but unfortunately don't have any fundamental background in training. And that's not even to say that you need to go get a degree in it from an established university, but at least even took the time to educate themselves, read the proper materials, maybe go through thorough internships so that they can sit down and say, hey, I kind of really know what I'm talking about here. So I think it's tough because the private sector, you kind of got to weed through the bad, so to speak, to kind of find the good. And there's, with that wide variation, it's just such a low barrier to entry that it can hamper the field as much as help it.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of thoughts on how coaching requirements can be like more regulated at this level?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really tough. I don't know if there's ever going to be a governing body like the NCAA or any professional private organizations that can hold a standard of expectation. Really it's important that I found, especially being in it for 4 or 5 years now, that education is at a premium. So as a company for us, and part of our ethos is reaching out to communities, reaching out to parents, and educating them on the process of, hey, if you're not going to be training with eForce and you're not going to be training with us, here's what to look for and, qualification levels to know that you're sending your young, malleable, adaptable athlete to a qualified professional. Let's look for X, Y, and Z in terms of, qualifications for them that, you can feel confident that the person that you sent them to is the right person to do the job. So I don't know if there's going to ever be a bigger governing body, especially in the private sector. It's kind of like the Wild West sometimes.
Yeah.
So I always root back to how can I educate these parents and these kids, even these high school coaches and team sport coaches looking to bring on, trainers to do team contracts on, what good is and what bad is and kind of how to audit these hiring processes, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I like that. Okay. So how can intelligent coaches at the private level, right, how can they combat the gimmicks that less knowledgeable coaches, like maybe the coach that throws the cone on the ground, right? How can we combat that?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I've seen in coaches who are the most successful in the private sector, and I'm going to deem right now success in terms of client acquisition, maybe financial lucrativeness, just being, touching a lot and working a lot with a large breadth of athletes. The biggest thing that I've found, and this was a really tough one for me coming from the college sector originally, where, you don't have to sell anybody on your program to come train with you. Yes, there's a little bit in the recruiting process, but once athletes are there, they do whatever you tell them to do because that's what they're there to do, and they know that you're there in their best interest. So, with that being said, again, I think it really goes back to education, but more often than not, it's getting in the community and building yourself as a valuable resource to the community. So, I think exposure on social media, whether good, bad, or indifferent, is an opportunity to kind of have a platform to demonstrate your knowledge. I think highlighting your successes with athletes, we're very objective in our training protocols. So we can say, hey, athlete X has improved their squat, their bench, their 5-10-5, decreased their resting heart rate, whatever metric you want that we've tested. We can objectively say that they're getting better. And I think, as hard as it is, because I think a lot of us coaches who are maybe coming from a professional or a college team into the private sector aren't comfortable with marketing ourselves. You need to market your product. You need to demonstrate that you're doing some things that, other coaches who may say that they're training qualities just truly aren't training.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Okay. And then going kind of back to what you said about kind of working together with other professionals, right? How can private facilities kind of better work together to serve different populations while, still keeping the lights on or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Where we're at, we're very fortunate that, most private sector gyms, even if they do sports performance, they lean heavily on general population training. And I think that's phenomenal. I think that's a large population of individuals you can pull from. Personally, where I'm at, that's not something that I'm super passionate or interested in. And to be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time researching on. And so I'm not the best person to do that. And I'll be the first to say that. So we're really fortunate as a company that we built all of our business and our clientele off of sports performance. So in terms of building that out, I think it's just really important to get out in the community, find like-minded individuals, and be able to sit down and share ideas, share concepts, and demonstrate that, you put your ego aside and that we're all here for the greater good and we want to build athlete-centric models. And, if you can do that and you can kind of latch on to individuals who have the same thought process, that allows you to go in on facilities together, which cuts down on, overall expenses, kind of helps share the load financially. And then also it becomes an internal referral service. Because if I have an athlete, I can internally refer them to the physical therapist who will then kick them right back to us once they're cleared. And if a physical therapist has an injured athlete, when they're cleared for, kind of more of a return to play protocol, return to sport protocol, they can kick them right back to us. So now we're not knocking on doors, sending newsletters out, and cold calling.
Yeah, that's a big deal because a lot of times, doing that, sometimes people, like having an internal referral, it just gives you so much more credibility within, the client's eyes as well,
100%. I couldn't agree more. And we've seen that a lot in where we're at.
I like that. Okay. And then transitioning a little bit more to the leadership continuing education, what's your approach in kind of managing the sports performance staff and how does that kind of look?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the big things that I believe in is handling with autonomy. So I give my staff a huge amount of autonomy because, they're all extremely educated professionals in their own right. And I want to, recognize that, and I also want to push for their strengths. So
Mm-hmm.
I try my best to put those individuals in positions that they're going to be successful in, and that highlight their strengths, and then give them the autonomy to utilize, both the science and the art of coaching, to develop either camps or products, or just be able to, kind of grow their own personal brand as a coach. I'm not ignorant to think that, in a few years down the line that they might leave us, but I'd be happy to know at least I gave them the opportunity and the platform to develop their skill set to take the next step. So from a leadership role, it's really sitting down and saying, hey, what are your goals? Is it to be here long term? Is it to use this as a stepping stone? And, based off of that, obviously with facilitating, the minimum requirements as a coach for eForce, what can we do to put you in positions and get you the experience you need to take the next step if it's not with us? And, so we do things like, we do basically a weekly meeting all the time, doing problem solving in regards to programming with difficult athletes that we have in terms of hard situations to work around. We do monthly meetings as a staff. We'll do quarterly continuing education. We'll do internal staff presentations to kind of present on topics that we're passionate about to, educate each other on our weak links. And then really just hold a lot of the camaraderie. And really what that builds is, I think, kind of an intrinsic motivation to be great in the field. And then also it builds this internal accountability. So that people are doing, what they're expected to do when they're expected to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. What do you guys kind of look for when hiring for different positions?
In general, I think especially, in the private sector, I've heard a lot of people say like I can make a great person a great coach. And so I hire for people who are phenomenal individuals. And again, I don't think that sentiment is wrong. But really at the end of the day, again, with the way we run our company and the way that I run my staff, we have large amounts of autonomy in terms of how you program for athletes, how you make your decision-making process. So I need to hire a coach who's relatively competent on, the principles and application of strength and conditioning. I don't need them to be perfect, because we will support them in that process. So it's all right if they're so-called a greenhorn a little bit. But I need to be able to find those individuals who are savvy and good problem solvers, so that we can give them the autonomy that they want, so that they can kind of grow and flourish. With that being said, I think just naturally through the interview process, because there's such a large wealth of, I think, highly qualified professionals in the field, and not enough jobs to come around, we're going to find people of high character. It's really finding, those high character individuals who also fit the mold in terms of, the other qualifications in knowledge base and exercise science and strength and conditioning that we want to see. And a lot of that's really developed through our internship process. So every person I've ever hired has been an intern for me, which kind of is what I always tell them is an extended interview process. Yeah,
most definitely. No, that's a good way to do it, because now you know what you're getting, right? And similar to the way they do stuff in sports, like now they know the system as well.
Absolutely. And so really what we do is, I'm fortunate we have a strong internship program. We bring primarily undergraduate interns in with us. They'll usually work with us from anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, depending on their schedule. And then they either go back to university and graduate, or they're just finished graduating. And oftentimes I tell them to get experience somewhere else, right? Go learn from another person, whether it's going to, like a global gym, like a 24-hour fitness, whether it's going and doing a GA, whether it's interning somewhere else. Just go expand your breadth of knowledge and understanding, because then they come back with things that may help us change our program for the better, because, we don't know everything and we're not exposed to everything. And so I think then when we bring them out, they have a better appreciation for what we have to offer and what we're doing here. And then they also bring a lot of new experiences that help us be really dynamic in the way we evolve as a staff.
That's a good way to do it, because how else are you going to bring in new information and new ideas and, shake things up a bit? So I think, that's probably the most applicable way, and it helps both parties, right?
Absolutely. And I also think, to kind of tie a bow on that note, also, it's nice because oftentimes, these interns have been working with the kids and the athletes that we have in our programs. And then and instead of bringing this brand new face that no one knows and they're anxious about it, or they have to rebuild rapport, or maybe we lose a few clients because it's not the same person, we're bringing someone who these athletes have seen before, who have maybe gone for a little while, but then came back, and the rapport's already built, and there's that, comfortability factor already with the athletes. And so it's a really assimilation just right back into the process. And for the coaches, they're coming back to something that they're familiar with and they know, so they can really hit the ground running and kind of just let their personality shine. Because they've kind of been in it a little bit and they're already a little bit familiar. So the onboarding process is a lot quicker for us.
I really like that. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit, right, and talk a little bit more about kind of professional development, specifically for like young coaches. So when you get coaches coming in and they're applying for either an internship or maybe even a position, right? What are like general format tips that you kind of have for resumes and cover letters?
Sure. I think in general, especially with the populations we pull, especially in regards to the internship, I think short and sweet on both of those is really good. You just got to recognize that where you're coming from more often than not, you don't have this big breadth of experience, and that's fine. That's part of why you're coming to do an internship, and we understand that. So I don't need a lot of extra fluff of like kind of extending yourself to make it seem like you've had more experience than you really have. Because again, we understand as an undergraduate intern, this might be your first experience, and that's all right. So what we want to see is just that you've had opportunities to work in, an athletic setting, whether that be, as a sport coach, whether that be as an intern somewhere else, whether as that observational hours, that you have a degree that's applicable to the direction that we're going in regards to undergraduate. And then really one of the things that I look for, especially when we start to get into the interview process, is are you a good problem solver? Because the private sector is unique where you're dealing with so many other schedules and it's so hit or miss. And then you're also, like, realistically speaking, dealing with the budget of the families that you're working with, that although your perfect undulated periodization scheme that goes 5 days a week and does all this is overextending for the family financially. So how can you consolidate these things that they need in a 1 day a week of training? What are these really meaningful qualities at the end of the day that you need to work with, and how can you give them enough saturation of a stimulus to make a meaningful change in performance? Because not everybody has the means to take advantage of what we have to offer, but we want to be able to make an impact with as many people as possible. So I think problem solving and just being able to be very fluid with your process and think outside the box is huge, especially when bringing those individuals on. And, again, in regards to hiring a coach, I think the same rules apply, to be honest with you. It helps, especially in the private sector, if you had a little bit of a sales background, because there is that part to it. No one likes it. I don't enjoy it myself either, but, it's just part of getting your hands dirty if you're not going to be at a professional or college rank.
Yeah. No, I totally get you. And so transitioning gears once again, right, what are some resources that have had kind of like a big impact on you, whether it's a book, a podcast, or something like that?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question. I think first and foremost, all my mentors that I've had and even colleagues along the way have had a big impact on me. I feel like I've learned everything. I feel like I've learned something from everybody that I've been around, whether it be from coaching, whether it be from interpersonal relationships, whether it be from branding, whether it be from how you carry yourself. I really think that interacting with individuals who are successful in the field and who have done it for way longer than you is one of the best ways to be able to kind of take a step forward as a coach. So, I hold a lot of credit to guys like Brian Miller, Mark McLaughlin, Jamie Rodriguez, Matt Howe, even guys like Alex Brink and Ryan DePaulo, who are my business partners now, who have really kind of helped mold me to who I am as, a professional in the field, and, professional being both a businessman and sports performance. In regards to text or podcast, I listen to a lot. I listen to your podcast. I think it's a great resource. I think that the CVAPS podcast does a phenomenal job. I think Just Fly is a great resource to just, think critically, listen to other professionals in the field work. And I'm a big believer in kind of anchoring on the seminal text. So, if you're ready for it, I think Super Training is a phenomenal book. The Management of the Weightlifter is a phenomenal book. Some of these bigger books, I think just any big exercise physiology books are phenomenal, just to really root yourself in the principles, because, Instagram does a great job of showing you all these methods of exercises and things like that. But I think, anchoring yourself on understanding the principles that you implement those methods with is hugely important.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay. And then moving into this last part right here, right? So if you have any, what are some quotes that you kind of live by?
Sure. One of the biggest quotes that I think I live by, being in the small business sector, and I think that this even resonates into, the college and professional ranks, is, there's oftentimes you're asked to do more than what your job description requires of you. So whether that be, a strength coach having to help set up equipment, set up a practice, help clean the locker room, or help with EQ guys in the, college or professional realms, whether you're a strength coach in the private sector who's asked to, help write a newsletter or help with sales or go give a presentation to a group of athletes, you're asked to do a lot more than oftentimes what your job description, entails. But I think in doing so, it puts you in a position to help, the group as a whole. And so with that being said, it's a long-winded answer to say, one of the big quotes that I live by is high tides raise all ships. So if everybody's doing well and everybody's supporting the greater good, everybody's going to benefit. And so it takes an egoless individual to see that and understand that you're one cog in the wheel of like a bigger organization or a bigger puzzle, so to speak. Yeah. And so if you can just keep your mind on understanding that high tides raise all ships and the good of all is kind of the good of you as well. I think that's huge, especially moving forward in the workforce. So I really kind of hold my head on that. That's a big one for me.
Okay. Is there a thought or experience from your past that you've held on to that's made a big difference in your life now?
Yeah, a lot. I think the consolidation of everything that I've gone through as an athlete from high school to college, kind of failing a little bit there and then being reinvigorated my passion in sports and more of the coaching realm. I really believe that, through your experiences in life, you can really take away either one of two things, what to do or what not to do. And I think each of those is equally as important. And so I think really just looking back on all my past experiences and kind of reflecting, just saying, hey, there's an experience that was a positive outcome and that's what we should do moving forward. Or there's something that I've done in the past and it really didn't work and that's not what I should do. And so I think anchoring on that and just understanding in a bigger, more reflective standpoint, like everything is a learning experience, right? And at the end of the day, you can learn what to do or what not to do from any of those one experiences. So to be honest with you, it might be a cop-out, but it's really hard to say that there's one, light that kind of shines in that regard.
Okay. What is the best advice that you've ever been given?
Oh, shoot. Best advice that I've ever been given. I think especially in, the professional realms, in the coaching realms, make the big time where you're at. I think it's, especially as young aspiring coaches, you're in a situation where you're looking for the next best job or you think the grass is always greener where you go. There's positive and negatives to every experience that you're going to have or every job that you have. And so I think instead of focusing on chasing where you're going and what the next opportunity is, you need to make sure that you're also making the big time where you're at right now, because that's going to truly open the doors to where you want to go in the future. And so I think kind of almost to piggyback on your quote question, another great quote off of that comment is, always be where your boots are. So don't be peering off into all these other opportunities, but don't forget where you're at here right now and your responsibilities to service these athletes or these coaches or these parents that you're working with.
Yeah. Okay. So in contrast to that, what's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Man, worst advice I've ever been given? Gosh. Yeah, I'd like to think I might have blacked that out of my thought process, to be honest. Man, worst advice I've ever been given? To be honest, I don't know if I got anything for you there.
Okay.
That's a tough question, and if I think of something, I'll let you know. But man, I don't know if I've ever gotten a lot of bad advice, because I think you can spin bad advice to good advice.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Okay. And then last question here: what kind of projects are you currently working on, and how can people kind of reach out to you and follow your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Me personally, I have an Instagram and a Twitter and a Facebook. Feel free to follow me there. I'm not super active, to be just straight up with you guys, so it's not super exciting. eForce Performance, we have a Instagram and a Twitter where we post a lot of our athletes' success stories and highlight a lot of them along with what's going on there. So I think that's a great realm. And then eForcePerformance.com is a phenomenal website that kind of highlights everything that we're doing. In regards to projects moving forward, one of the big projects that we're working on right now as a staff is we go through an annual overhaul of our program. So as of right now, we're looking at what we've done over the last year or 2 years we're taking all this data that we've accumulated that's objective and saying, hey, where are our strengths and our weaknesses, and how can we augment these programs and make changes based off of recent research and our past experiences to service our athletes in the best opportunity that we can. So that's a big project for me and my staff right now, to just continually overhaul our program and give the best training offered to these kids. So that's a big one. And then I think, really the other big one is we just hired on a great guy in Hayden, who just worked and got his master's from the University of Leeds. He's kind of a sports scientist, so to speak. So we're working on kind of building out more load management protocols for the teams that we work with. So even when we're not working with them anymore and they're in season, we can kind of help remotely in managing their player load. Obviously, high school doesn't have the opportunity to use things like GPS, but through subjective surveys or giving coaches kind of a framework to work off of to kind of help build out better, in-season management of their athletes.
I love it. Okay. Well, Coach, thank you so much for your time. This has been fantastic. I love what you guys are doing, and I hope that more people, can kind of hear about you and dive into some of the things that you are doing and some of the educational pieces that you're putting out there. So once again, thank you for your time, and hopefully we can connect again soon in the future.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.